The Book of Esther is one of the most remarkable books in the Bible, not just for what it says, but for what it doesn't say. It never directly mentions the name of God, yet his presence is undeniable throughout the story. This book teaches us that God is always at work, even when he seems silent. Through the bravery of one woman and the divine timing of key events, we witnessed how God orchestrates salvation for his people without a single miracle, just providence, courage, and faith. Esther's story begins during the reign of King Xerxes of Persia. After removing his former queen Vashti for refusing to appear at his banquet, the king seeks a new queen. A royal search begins across the empire to find the most beautiful women. Among them is a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, also known as Esther. She is an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai and lives in exile with the Jewish people, a minority in a foreign land. Esther is taken to the king's palace and wins his favor. Eventually, she is crowned queen. She keeps her Jewish identity secret, as instructed by Mordecai. This early part of the book already speaks to God's providence. Out of all the women in the empire, a young Jewish exile becomes queen. Though she doesn't yet know why, she is exactly where she needs to be. This reminds us that God often places people in specific positions for reasons that may only be revealed later. Meanwhile, Mordecai uncovers a plot to assassinate the king and reports it through Esther. His actions are recorded in the royal chronicles, but he receives no reward at that time. Again, we see the theme of timing. God stores up rewards for the right moment. Then enters the villain, Haman, a high-ranking official who is promoted above all the princes. Haman expects everyone to bow to him, but Mordecai refuses. Haman's rage becomes a vendetta not just against Mordecai, but against all Jews. He convinces the king to issue a decree to annihilate all Jews in the empire, casting lots to choose the date. This decree is sealed with the king's ring and spread across the land. The fate of the Jewish people appears sealed. When Mordecai learns of the decree, he mourns in sackcloth and ashes and urges Esther to intervene. But Esther faces a dilemma. Approaching the king uninvited could mean death, even for the queen. She hasn't been summoned in 30 days, and breaking the law could cost her everything. Here we reach one of the most powerful moments in the book. In Esther 4:14, Mordecai tells her, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" This verse is the heartbeat of the Book of Esther. It declares that no moment, position, or circumstance is accidental. God places his people in key positions to fulfill divine purposes. Esther, moved by faith and courage, chooses to risk her life. She tells Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast for 3 days. "If I perish, I perish," she says. Her boldness shows us that faith sometimes calls for sacrifice. In chapter 5, Esther courageously approaches the king, and to her relief, he extends the golden scepter, sparing her life. Instead of immediately pleading for her people, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. Then, at that banquet, she invites them to another banquet the next day. This delay builds tension but also shows strategic wisdom and divine timing at work. That night, something incredible happens. The king cannot sleep and orders the royal records to be read to him. The very story of Mordecai saving his life is read aloud. The king realizes Mordecai was never honored and decides to reward him the next morning. Meanwhile, Haman arrives intending to ask for Mordecai's execution. Instead, he asked humiliated, ordered by the king to publicly honor Mordecai by parading him through the city on horseback. This reversal is both ironic and divine. God is turning the enemy's plans upside down. At the second banquet, Esther finally reveals her identity and exposes Haman's plot. She says, "We have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed." The king, shocked and enraged, leaves the room. Haman pleads for his life, but ends up falling on the couch, where Esther reclines just as the king returns. Interpreting this as an assault, the king orders Haman's execution on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But the story doesn't end there. The decree to kill the Jews is still active, and in Persian law, a royal edict cannot be revoked. However, the king gives Mordecai and Esther the authority to write a new decree. This new law allows the Jews to defend themselves against any attack. What follows is an epic moment of divine justice. On the appointed day, the Jews rise up and defend their lives, gaining victory over their enemies throughout the empire. Mordecai is promoted to Haman's former position, and the Jewish people are saved. To celebrate, they establish the Feast of Purim, named after the lots Haman cast. It's a feast of joy, deliverance, and remembering how God turned sorrow into gladness. To this day, Purim is still celebrated by Jewish communities around the world. Key teachings from the Book of Esther. God is present even when he is silent. Though his name isn't mentioned, his hand is visible in every detail of the story. Divine timing is everything. From Esther's selection to the king's sleepless night, God's timing is perfect. Faith requires courage and risk. Esther's "If I perish, I perish" moment shows the boldness of real faith. God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. Esther was a young orphan, yet chosen to deliver a nation. Enemies of God's people never prevail in the end. Haman's downfall is a reminder that God defends his people. Strategic wisdom and prayer go hand in hand. Esther fasted, prayed, and planned her approach wisely. Celebrating deliverance is biblical. The institution of Purim shows the importance of remembering and rejoicing over God's acts. Why Esther still matters today. The Book of Esther speaks to everyone who has ever wondered whether their life matters in God. Esther's story. It reminds us that God uses ordinary moments to accomplish extraordinary things, and that even when he seems distant, he's orchestrating every detail. When we face injustice, fear, or pressure to remain silent, Esther's example encourages us to stand up, speak out, and trust God. You, too, may have been placed where you are for such a time as this.